In this video, I'll demonstrate how to upgrade the vCenter Server appliance from version 6.7 to vCenter version 7. And here you can see I've got a console window open to my current vCenter Server appliance instance. You can see that it's currently version 6.7. And down below, you can see all of the addressing information for the current vCenter Server appliance. So I'm going to copy that information down because I'm going to need it for part of the upgrade. So now I'm logged into another machine that's part of my domain, and you can see here I've downloaded the vCenter installation media. So I'll just click on my ISO image, and you can see here we've got the CLI installer and the UI installer. I'm going to go to the UI installer, and within the Win32 folder, I'm going to find installer.exe and launch that. And once the installer launches, I should have options to either do a fresh install of the vCenter Server appliance. I have an upgrade option. That's the option I'm going to use. But if I had a Windows vCenter Server, I could use migrate to migrate away from Windows and get the vCenter Server appliance version 7 running. Or I could restore from backup. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on upgrade here. And I just want to make a side note. At this point, I've taken a backup of my vCenter Server appliance. So a couple quick things here. There are prerequisites that you have to complete before performing this upgrade. We have to make sure that our clocks are synchronized between our ESXi hosts and our domain controllers, and that vCenter is also synchronized as well. If I were to be using an external update manager, I would need the migration assistant running on that update manager instance. And there are also a number of prerequisites that are included in the documentation. So if you take a look at the vCenter upgrade guide, it'll spell out all the prerequisites for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and click next here and begin stage 1 of my upgrade. And I'll accept the end user license agreement and click next. And now I'll enter in the Source Vcenter appliance that I want to upgrade. So here's the IP address of my existing vCenter Server appliance. Notice, by the way, in stage 1, what we're essentially doing is deploying a vCenter Server virtual machine. That's stage 1, creating our new vCenter Server appliance virtual machine. In stage 2, we're going to copy all of the data over from the existing vCenter Server appliance into the new one. So essentially what we're doing right now in this first stage of the upgrade is creating a new virtual appliance. So now I've got my IP address in here. I'll click on connect to source. And once it connects, I'll have to put in my SSO password here. Now I'll put in the IP address of the ESXi host that the Source Vcenter instance is running on. And I'll also have to put in the root credentials for that source host as well. And I'll click on next. And I'll just click it yes on the certificate warning. And I've got an error here. And I wanted to show you this error just in case you run into it in your environment. So the error it's giving me here is a problem occurred while getting data from the Source vCenter Server. And this typically happens when we have an expired password on the vCenter Server appliance. So in this part of the course, I'm going to include a resource in the Udemy course resources that can walk you through fixing that issue in case it happens to you. I'm not going to demonstrate it here, but it's a really straightforward problem to solve. I just want to mention though, if you're getting this error, check to make sure that the password on your vCenter Server appliance is not expired. So now I've updated the root password on my vCenter Server appliance. I'm going to try this one more time. And there we go. It works successfully. So now I'm going to put in the IP address of the ESXi host that the new vCenter Server appliance is going to run on. And I'll put in the root credentials for that ESXi host. You could also put in the address of a vCenter server here. Just understand that when you do that, you are going to still install the vCenter Server appliance on some ESXi host. I can just pick one of the hosts or a cluster that is managed by this vCenter server. But I'm going to target it at a specific ESXi host and click Next here and just say yes to the certificate warning. Here I'll put in the name of the new virtual machine that's going to be deployed, and I'll set my root password, and I'll click on Next. And now I'll choose my deployment size. Now this just happens to be a lab environment, and so I'm going to go with the tiny size. And for storage, I'm going to go with the default option. However, if I'm going to be running a larger environment with more hosts or more virtual machines, I can choose those options here. So just be aware that it's giving me multiple form factors, multiple deployment sizes here that I can choose from. So I'm going to stick with tiny and click on Next, and that should be just fine for my lab environment. And it's giving me an error. So it looks like my ESXi host doesn't actually have enough available memory. I have to have 12 gigs. So let me resolve that really quickly here. And I'll pause my recording while I fix that issue. So now I've added some memory to my ESXi host so that it should be able to run this vCenter virtual appliance. I am going to go back a couple of screens to step 4. And I'll just keep the same address in here for the ESXi host, but I'm going to go ahead and click on Next. And basically, I'm just refreshing this thing. So now I go to the next screen. I'm again going to choose the tiny deployment size, and this time it should work. And there we go, it worked. So now I'm going to pick a data store upon which I want to run this vCenter server appliance. Now, in my lab environment, I'm definitely going to enable thin disk mode because that's going to save me a significant amount of storage capacity. And basically what this is a thin provisioned virtual disk. So it's only going to use the storage capacity that it absolutely needs. Now, if your storage array itself is already thin provisioned, there's no point in selecting this option. The other thing that I want to point out here, you can see that my data store currently has 73 gigabytes of space available, but I am enabling thin disk mode. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next here, and it's allowing me to move to the next screen. So I do have the sufficient minimum space required to run this vCenter server appliance. So my vCenter server appliance is going to have a virtual network interface card. And by the way, in vCenter 7, I can later on create multiple virtual NICs to create a multi-homed configuration. But right now I'm just concerned about the primary VNIC, VNIC 0. So I'm going to connect my new virtual appliance to the VM network. I'm going to give it a temporary IP address. I'm going to assign a subnet mask. Now remember, what we're doing is we're creating a new vCenter server appliance that is eventually going to assume the identity of the existing vCenter server appliance. So the IP address that we're assigning here is not permanent, it's just temporary until it can assume all of the configuration of the existing vCenter server appliance. And then I'm going to put in my default gateway, and that's 192.168.199.2 and my DNS server here. And I'm going to go ahead, and before I click on Next, I'm going to go to this DNS server. And by the way, the DNS server just so happens to be the system that I'm running this upgrade from. So within the Windows server that I'm running here, I'm going to launch Server Manager. And within Server Manager, I have DNS here, and I can manage this DNS server. So I'm going to launch DNS Manager. And then within DNS Manager, I'm going to go to my forward lookup zone, and I'm going to go to the domain that I've created, and I'm going to make sure that I have a DNS record for this temporary vCenter server appliance. So I'm creating a new A record. I'm putting in the name of my new vCenter server appliance and the temporary IP address, and I'm going to go ahead and add that DNS record. And if we skip this step, our installation isn't going to work. So let's scroll down a little bit here. Here's the new record that I've created for this temporary IP address. So now I can go back to the vCenter server appliance installer and go ahead and click on Next here. And then I can click on Finish. If I want to review and verify here, I can do that, but I'm just going to go ahead and click on Finish. And so basically now I'm just going to wait. The new virtual appliance is being created. If I want to, I can go into the host client itself. Here you can see I've connected to the individual ESXi host that I'm targeting the installation of my new vCenter Server appliance on. And I can see there's a new virtual machine that's being created. I can even look under recent tasks, and I can see that a new virtual appliance is being imported. So I'm just going to let this process continue, and I'm going to pause my recording until stage 1 is complete. Okay, so here I am at stage 2. Stage 1 is now complete. The vCenter Server appliance has been successfully installed. Now, if you are having trouble getting to stage 2, make sure you check on those DNS settings. If the DNS record isn't created properly, you're not going to make it to stage 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Continue here. Here you can see the address for the VMware of the new vCenter Server appliance. So if I wanted to manage that, I could go there. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to click on Continue and allow this process to continue on to stage 2, where the configuration is actually going to be pulled from the existing vCenter Server appliance into the new one. So it's telling you here, hey, make sure you've got the Source Vcenter Server appliance backed up. I do. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Next here. And now I'll pick the data that I want to bring over from my Source vCenter to my new vCenter. So do I just want the bare basics, the configuration and the inventory? Do I want to bring over all of the tasks and events that exist and the history of those? Do I want to bring over the history of tasks and events and performance metrics? So it's really not much data. I'm going to bring over everything and click Next. And I am not going to join the Customer Experience Improvement Program here. And here we go. We are ready to complete. So I'm just going to check this box affirming that I have backed up my Source vCenter, and I'll hit Finish. And once we begin this process, the vCenter server on version 6.7 is going to be shut down. All of the configuration is going to be copied over. And once that configuration is copied over, the new vCenter 7 virtual appliance is going to assume the network identity of the source, and it's going to take over. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here and allow stage 2 to complete. And so this part's probably going to take a while. I'm going to pause my recording while stage 2 completes copying all of the source vCenter data to the target vCenter and brings that new vCenter instance online. All right, so I paused my recording for about 20 minutes, and now I can see that stage 2 is complete, and I've got my vCenter server address here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that link, and I'm going to launch the Vsphere client. Now notice there's only one type of client that's being presented here, the Vsphere client with HTML5. The Flash client is not shown, so I'm going to go ahead and launch the HTML5 Vsphere client. The same SSO credentials that I used with my old vCenter server should still work here, so I'm going to go ahead and log in and validate that the Vsphere client is working properly on my new vCenter server appliance. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. So we've got a couple of little issues here like memory usage and CPU issues, but the new vCenter server appliance is up and running. The old one is currently powered off. So let's go over to the host client for my ESXi host. And I'm going to log in. And this is the ESXi host that the old vCenter server appliance was running on, which is now powered off, and that the new vCenter server appliance has been created on. So let's just quickly open a console to this new vCenter server appliance and take a look. So here we are at the console window for the new vCenter server appliance. Notice that it is now vCenter Server Appliance version 7, and that the new virtual appliance has assumed the identity of the old virtual appliance, including the name of it and the IP address as well. So now our upgrade of vCenter is complete, and we may want to just leave it for a while, but eventually we're going to have to go back and delete the old vCenter instance that still exists.